Hello everybody, AJ Rising here, and today we are on 1 month of Linux Mint 18.1. Yes, I have been using Linux Mint 18.1, specifically the Cinnamon desktop, for just over a month now, doing what I refer to as the Linux Mint Challenge. And if you didn't catch that video when I initially started this, essentially what I wanted to look at is, can a more experienced Linux user be happy using what is traditionally termed as a new user or newbie distribution, Linux Mint? Um, and like I said, it's been a little over a month now, and all in all, it's been a good experience. And to be quite honest, I have never spent this much time running Linux Mint. I have run Linux Mint in the past, when I've done my reviews and whatnot. And actually, for a while, one of my kids was running Linux Mint on their laptop. But I have never been what you would consider a Linux Mint user. When I first got started in with running Linux, I was running Ubuntu, and then later on it was Kubuntu, Ubuntu Gnome. Moved on to other distros, but never really. Linux Mint was never really a distro that I spent much time on. So here's what I found. Uh, for starters, from a standpoint of usability, everything worked right out of the box. I never had issues with crashes and things not working, and I'm running this app and then it crashes, and this didn't work, that didn't. No, everything worked. It always worked like it was supposed to. So that right there is a big plus, and that right there, you know, for a lot of users, that's all they care about. They want, you want a distro that once it's installed on your computer, it's set up the way that you want it. You don't have to worry about it breaking, and you get such and such update, and now nothing works. And well, it works pretty good except for this one or two things. No, everything always worked the way it's supposed to. So very, very happy about that. Uh, Also, this is the first time that I spent more than just a few minutes, or half hour, or whatever, using the newer X apps, which technically they are ports of older applications that have been around for a while. Um, but like I said, it's the first time that I've used most of them for any amount of time, and once again, everything worked like it should. No issues in that. And there's a few of the Linux Mint apps that I hadn't really used before, but have turned out to be somewhat useful stuff that I used to do, or I would normally do from the command line. Big one is formatting USBs and burning ISOs to USBs for doing my testing. And I'll pull up, let's see, USB. So I've got a USB over in my my USB port, and we can pull up the stick formatter. Of course, it popped up on my other monitor, but okay, so we'll pick what we want to format. Yeah, I want it FAT32, but you could go to NTFS or ext4. Volume label, I'm really not too concerned with that, and just click format and give it your password. And let it do a thing. Now, granted, this USB stick formatter, it is a very simple app. It does not have, pretty quick, it does not have quite the, I guess you could say, options as if you're doing it from the terminal. But you saw there, it's quick, it's easy, you can get it done really quick. It's a good app. And then the other one, the image writer. Um, so you go and you pick out your image, and let me just go down to ISOs, and I'm going to be testing Ubuntu 17.04. I've got the beta 2, so let's go ahead and burn that one, and we're going to burn it to that USB that I just formatted. Click right, put in your password, and boom, it it does its thing. Not quite as quick as the USB formatter, but you know, when I've been using it over the past few weeks, it's not really any faster or slower than burning an ISO from the command line. So once again, nice, easy to work with. Again, not as many options on what I could do from the terminal, but it's quick, easy, dirty way to do it. Um, and just because you are a more advanced Linux user doesn't mean that time isn't a premium. Pulling that app up and boom, getting things done really quick rather than opening the terminal and typing away for a couple of minutes. That time may be valuable to you. While on the subject of software and applications, that sort of thing, one thing that's really nice is a huge variety of software that is available. Not only is there a lot available through the repositories, there's tons of PPAs out there that you can go and install so that you can download and install various pieces of software. You can also go and install software through deb files. So you want to get the Chrome browser, the Opera browser, or there's this one piece of software out there you want to give it a try, and when you go to their website, boom, they've got a deb file. You can download it, install that way. Very nice. This is as compared to a distribution that does not have quite the volume or variety of software in the repositories. If it is not a Ubuntu based distribution, you're not going to be able to download that deb file, or at the very least you need to be a Ubuntu or Debian based distribution so that you can download that deb file and install that way. So Solus is my favorite distribution right now. It's what is normally my daily driver. However, because it is a newer distribution, it does not have quite the volume of software available through its repositories. All bases are covered, but it just doesn't have that huge volume. And if I'm out looking at, I see such and such website, they got this really neat piece of software, I want to give it a try. Uh, there's a pretty good chance that if I was on a Ubuntu based distribution that they may have a deb file that I can download and install. If I'm on Solus, probably I'm going to have to download a tar file and go through compiling and all that myself. Like I said, unless it's in the repositories, which is possible. It's a growing distribution and whatnot. But like I said, it just doesn't have the huge software base that Linux Mint has. And while we're talking software and applications, really nice software center and nice update manager. But the thing that I really liked about that update manager, let me go and pull it open, and let me drag it over here, wasn't as much the regular updates. You can do that through the terminal fairly easily. But the kernel updater, you open that up, and it tells you what kernel you're currently using and all the available kernels that you could go and install. And you can see on here I'm at 4.8.0-46, but recently they've added kernel 4.10. I might go and install that just to see how well it works. But more distributions need to go to something similar to this for going and switching kernels. Manjaro has something similar. Other distributions do have something similar. But on a lot of distributions, if you want to go and change which kernel you're using, you need to get that terminal open and do it through there. And there's a school of thought that if you can't do it through the terminal, then you really shouldn't be fooling around with changing kernels, and there is some validity to that. But let's say you've got a recent laptop, or a fairly new piece of hardware, and you need to play around trying to find, okay, what kernel do I need to go to so that things work out right. Uh, it may be a little more efficient for you to sit down with a tool like this and be able to find, okay, this is the kernel that works out best for me. So some not so good things, and these aren't really. I don't want to call them bad or issues, but they're things that I didn't quite look on as favorable. I guess that's the best way to put it. Um, I had to go and install a fair number of PPAs so that I could have more recent versions of various pieces of software. Now, on some, it's not going to be a big deal. On others, it is a big deal. One of them is Kden Live. Really, at least in my opinion, the best version of Kden Live is the most recent version, because usually that has the most bug fixes, um, and is going to function the best. Well, the most recent version is not in the repository, so I need to install a PPA so that I can get the most recent version there. Same thing with Libreoffice. Libreoffice version was a little bit older, not real old. It was 5. I don't know. It was newer than it was in the 5 series, but I wanted to have the most recent version. Again, it wasn't there, so I installed it. And again, this is not going to be a big deal for most people. It may be for your more experienced users, because um, a lot of your Linux enthusiasts tend to be wanting to, may want to sit on the bleeding edge, or at least close to the bleeding edge of software development, or they're more likely to be, oh, the new version of app X just came out, I gotta have it. Whereas your more casual user is like, yeah, whatever, just as long as I can get my work done. So there was that sort of thing. I ended, like I said, a fair number of PPAs that I had to install. Um, Not a big deal, but a little bit of upfront work. Um, the desktop is very customizable, which is a good thing, except when you're a person like me who is easily distracted. Um, and I was not very productive with Linux Mint, as opposed to when I am running the Gnome Shell desktop, just because there is so much stuff to tweak. I found I was always stopping and playing around with stuff, and a lot of that depends on your personality. I'm the kind of person that when I sit down to get some work done, I need it absolutely silent and in the room. There has to be no distractions, so that I can get to my work. That's the only way that I can stay focused. There's other people that there could be an atomic explosion in the same room, and there's kids screaming and TV running, radio blaring, and they are completely oblivious to it when they're getting their work done. I am not that person. Like I said, needed absolutely quiet, no distractions, and this desktop provides plenty of distractions. Um, so it's not necessarily a design flaw of Linux Mint. It's it just doesn't mesh well with my personality and getting work done. Let me take a look at my notes here. Uh, I've talked when I've done my Linux Mint reviews in the past. I've talked a lot about I don't like their default theming. Theming is fairly easy to change. Um, However, and kind of going back to to talking, comparing to the GNOME Shell, I very much like the look of the client-side decorations, also known as the header bars, that you get when you're running. Um, GNOME 324, GNOME 322, whatever. And just as a comparison, I installed Nautilus, and you can look at it side by side by Nemo, which is the default file manager here. So there's Nemo, your default file manager in the Cinnamon desktop. And let me pull up Nautilus, and we'll put Nautilus side by side. Now, I am not trying to say Nemo is a bad file manager. I like Nemo. It's got features that used to be available in Nautilus, which are no longer available. Um, but to me, just looking at the two, the Nautilus file manager is cleaner. I like the look of it. Um, to me, it is more modern. To me, when you look at Nemo, you're you're stuck with the UI of 25 years ago. Once again, just my personal opinion, but I do like the look and the layout much better over here on Nautilus. Um, to me, it is a more efficient use of space. It is cleaner looking, and my complaints. I do complain about some of the stuff that they stripped out of Nautilus, but just looking at the two, I like this one better. And the same thing kind of goes along with, a lot of your other Gnome 3 applications. I like the look, the streamlining. I really don't know how to describe it, but how just looking at the app, I like it better with that header bar. So, as many of my regular viewers know, I am a huge fan of Gnome Shell. I like not only how it looks, I like how it functions. I like the fact that I can hit that Windows slash super key, whatever you want to call it. I get a complete overview of everything. I can switch apps. I can move things to different workspaces, all that kind of stuff. I miss not having that when I am on Linux Mint. Linux Mint is essentially a traditional desktop, which means that your UI dates back to the early 90s. Now, it's not necessarily a bad workflow, but it is very different from what I have become used to. And after having used Gnome Shell for so long, I am very efficient at working with Gnome Shell as my desktop environment. Sadly, Gnome Shell is not available if you are on Linux Mint. I guess in theory, you could go and install Gnome Shell on Linux Mint. I've never given it a try. And actually, just now is the first time I've thought about that. Might be an interesting project just to see if I could pull it off. But anyway, point is that it is the UI. It is the workflow that I have become accustomed to, and I work most efficiently that way. Um, and even after having been you know back on a traditional desktop for the past month or so, I still find, and as kind of time went on, as the month went on, I found instead of myself getting more used to um, using uh, the Cinnamon desktop, I found myself more and more wanting to get back to GNOME Shell because I already talked about the distraction issue, but just quite frankly for me, the workflow is not as efficient on a traditional desktop as it is when I am on GNOME Shell. Um, and I know there's a lot of people out there that do not like GNOME Shell because of the way the workflow runs, and I get that. Everybody is completely different on this one, but for me, that is where I am most efficient. So, having said all that, that kind of to wrap things up, um, to get to the overlying question, can a more experienced user be happy on Linux Mint? Well, I think yes. And there are plenty of people that have been using Linux for years that are running Linux Mint precisely for the stuff that I talked about back at the beginning of the video. It is very stable. You install it, it's ready to go, and you don't have to worry about things not functioning for you. Everything is great right out of the box. You little tweaking, change the theming, make it look pretty to your specifications or whatnot. But um, for the most part, very stable, and you're ready to go right out of the box. There is definite appeal there for experienced user and new user alike. Moving forward, I said that I would do Linux Mint Challenge also on Linux Mint KDE, and then I've had a few people that want me to do basically the same sort of thing on KDE Neon. Just see, am I happy there? So I don't think I'm going to do that right away. We've got the release of the Ubuntu 17.04 series coming up in a few days, and I want to get through testing all that and whatnot. So probably what I will do is I'm either going to stick with this while I'm doing those reviews, or I may go and jump back to Solus while I'm doing those reviews, and then continue on with the Linux Mint Challenge. I don't know, month, 2 months from now, something like that. Um, Anyway, hopefully you have enjoyed the video. As always, leave comments, questions, all that kind of stuff down below. I try to get to it as soon as possible. If you are not a subscriber, please subscribe, and I hope to see you all on my next video. Thanks a lot.